contractors. If there was a third party, for example, that had control of one of these Niger Delta states, then people like Saraki or Rocha Okorocha, who have lost so many big elections, can then go there and build it up as a third force. It's something to consider. Having control of a government with an oil producing state is very, very important for either a ruling party or for the opposition.
In your analogy, Eromo, of oil money being venture capital for political startups, in your analogy, where does Tonya Cole fit in this?
Tonya Cole is a guy who happened to be in the right place at the wrong time. He's making good money from. You have a thriving oil firm, right? You've gotten contracts from your friends in Rivers and Bayelsa states. So why not just go ahead with your this and play the long-term game? He's gotten involved in a mess. There's so many political players in Rivers State, who have a bone to pick with each other, one, or secondly have the a violent streak, right? It's almost like you need a violent streak in Rivers State. Tonya Cole has none of this. He doesn't have. Before now, he didn't have any major enemies. Before now, he didn't have a violent bone. But all of that might have changed with 2015. All in all, he's one of the losers in this election, because he's lost his credibility with his people, because he's now seen as an enabler of violence, along with Miachi and Nyesom Wike. He's now seen as an enabler of violence. And then when he's going back to business, of course, you're going to have people question marks, from willing collaborators and all. I know he really should have stayed in business and played the long-term game if he wanted to get into politics.
Yeah. It does look a hell of a mess in Rivers in particular, Eromo, the way that it's been suspended and so on. And I think one of the questions a lot of people are asking is, how far is this going to permeate across the region, to the extent that it's going to cut oil production, going to even disrupt gas production? We saw this nasty explosion in Bayelsa about 2 weeks ago on the Ateo, or near the Ateo pipeline, and various versions of what happened came out, how many people died and all the rest of it. I guess the question people are asking is really, are the various resource nationalist and militant groups going to accept the election results as is? I mean, or are they going to go into a sort of militant mode? I mean, I think there was one particular group, I think it was the Avengers, that said, the Delta Avengers, said they would not accept a Buhari victory, whether they regarded it as stolen or not. They just wouldn't accept it because they were certain that the PDP should win. I wondered where this leaves the militant groups, particularly the deal that the Vice President, Yemi Osinbajo, had negotiated, which was essentially like security money, don't attack the pipelines, don't affect oil production, and will remain in dialogue, because it seems to, since that deal, there doesn't seem to have been much progress in cutting a new deal for the Niger Delta.
Well, it's all very hazy. Well, you have to understand that some of the peace in the Niger Delta has been possible because many of the militants are into illegal bunkering, and so the army and the federal government are looking the other way. There's a huge, like dozens of illegal refineries on the shores of Focados, Escravos, and areas within, and the area, these trunk lines are stretched from Delta State down through Bayelsa to Rivers, right? So that is one of the things that's keeping these people happy, even as the deal, a new deal is stalling. But what I envisage is that there will be some trouble after Buhari, probably just before Buhari names his new cabinet or afterwards, because everyone is probably going to be watching to see who will be the next petroleum minister as long as Emmanuel Egbejule is there, things are still going to be slightly peaceful. One, he wants to be governor. Secondly, he's well respected in the Niger Delta, especially after overruling Rotimi Amechi in setting up of the Maritime Academy. It was seen as, he rules in favor of the militants. We need a university there. This will be built, even though Amechi, and Amechi doesn't have quite, he's not as beloved as he used to be in his first term as governor, because he's seen as having sabotaged President Goodluck Jonathan. So as long as Egbejule remains minister, right, and illegal bunkering is allowed to go on largely unchecked in the Niger Delta, these boys are still going to be happy because there's cash flow for them. But when you remove either the cash flow or you remove personality, so if they put someone else, maybe even Amechi, if Amechi becomes Minister of Petroleum, or someone else is made Minister of Petroleum, then someone else who is not from the Niger Delta, or who is not seen as having a good rapport, then you will see these boys in full force. Secondly, another thing that could be inimical to oil production in the Niger Delta is something curious happened. There's been this disputed field, OML 11, this oil block, which is in Ogoniland, in Rivers State. It's been disputed for so long. Now, the cleanup of that area, the environmental cleanup, has also stalled, right? Now, Abba Kyari, who's chief of staff to the president, recently announced that the field is now going to be taken over by the by the NNPC, right? The NNPC is going to exercise its right through one of its subsidiaries. So what that means is that oil production is going to resume, but the federal government senses that if a private company, there were so many players involved, including Tony Elumelu's, I've forgotten the name of his company. Anyways, there are so many private players involved in that thing, but the federal government is stepping in, suspecting that there might be trouble if private entities go in there to explore, so it's taking a preemptive step. That is how I see it. Because any private company that goes in there, there's definitely going to be violence. There's going to be cuts to oil production. So that's the second thing there, because that's the second thing that could hamper, be an economically important subject as we go on the next few days. So cutting cash flow or taking away personnel that's favorable to the militants, or if a private company goes to explore in this disputed field in Ogoniland. So all of this could be responsible for a drop in production. You could see the militants come back on the front lines again. That's what I think.
One final issue to wrap up on Nigeria. The appeals process for the presidential vote is in full swing. And I just wanted to get both of your thoughts on how this might proceed and, what the implications might be for the various actors down the road. Patrick, why don't we start with you?
Yeah. It seems the Atiku campaign is taking this exercise pretty seriously. They've got court rulings to give them the rights to inspect quite a lot of the electronic side of the processes, not the fabled servers, but quite a lot more of that. And also to really hold the Electoral Commission to account about its provision of data. And what has been the case in a lot of these elections that have gone over to the sort of electronic biometric mode is these results are announced in the center and they're aggregated results. And the whole idea of biometric elections is you're meant to be able to monitor the results right in the locality, in Nigeria's case, at the 179,000 polling stations, getting an understanding of how those results are collated, polling station by polling station, constituency by constituency, and then state by state to produce the national result, rather than just this sort of block figure of he's won by 4 million. And I think if they're able to do that and to make it the standard legal sanctified procedure that INEC, the Electoral Commission, produces these disaggregated results in a timely manner, it could actually be a great victory. So my take on the process, and I am sure Roma has mastered the detail, but it may be like what happened in Ghana in 2012. There was quite a long and detailed appeals process in which all these arguments were made about the deficiencies of the electoral system. So although they found in favour of the incumbent, John Mahama at the time, they did actually institute a number of very, very important reforms that enabled the opposition to go back, reboot its organisation, and actually win a stunning victory in 2016. So, I mean, that would be an optimistic take if the PDP legal team, and they're pretty high-powered from what I understand, can push these issues in the courts, and yes, above all else, the courts give them a sympathetic hearing.
Well, what do you make of that, Eromo? Is that a potential silver lining? And in fact, if you were to stand back from the last few recent elections, when you had, what seemed to be a much more functioning and coherent INEC under Professor Jega, and now potentially with a rigorous assault from the PDP team to push, reforms for the future. Nigeria is cruel to the optimist, but do you hold out hope for future elections as a result?
I was just going to say that about being an optimist, because the only Nigerian election that has ever been overturned, was the freest and fairest, and it was overturned by the hand of a dictator, right? The courts have never overturned the presidential election in Nigeria, regardless of how, well documented the irregularities are, and I don't see that happening now. No matter how well versed Atiku's and the PDP's lawyers are, no matter how lucky Peter Obi has been in the past, or Atiku himself has been lucky, no matter how this seems like final grand climax, I don't see that happening. Now, what could happen for future sake could be that INEC will decide to go the full electronic way, but I don't also see that happening, at least not in 2023. I don't see that happening. Probably in 2028. The same way we conducted elections in 1999, apart from the card readers, the same way we conducted elections in 1999 with the same old types of ballot paper, the same old collation systems. That's almost precisely how we're still conducting it in 2019, 20 years after. So I don't see that going to suddenly change in 2023, because there are people who are going to make money off contracts, kickbacks, for supplying these plastic boxes. There are people who are going to make off all of these contracts. When you automate this through technology, you are going to cut a lot of stakeholders in the process, of which should rightfully be so. But that is not going to happen. So what I anticipate is that in 2023, we would have learned a few of our lessons, changed things, but there will still probably be reason to dispute the elections. What needs to be done, as a matter of fact, is a fundamental dismantling of the Electoral Act, reforming of the electoral process, using even the card reader technology isn't being fully utilized, right? There are several protocols, there are several other functions that are not being put in place. So until then, it's just going to be a cruel joke to be an optimist. We just have to, anticipate that in 2023 things will be marginally, significantly better, and that some level of technology would have been adopted, and that the electoral process, the new Electoral Act, which the Senate had, would either have been signed or even amended, improved. An improved version would have been signed. Until that happens, I'm afraid, we might continue to see issues with the presidential elections, and I honestly do not see it being upturned. Honestly, do not.
I suppose, as I did see on Twitter, at least your president wasn't put in place by Russia.
Well, we can neither confirm nor deny.
Thanks a lot, Eromo. Speak to you soon.
All right. Yes, great to talk.
So, Patrick, we both, I believe we both own a British passport among us.
One of our many passports.
One of our many passports is British. Watching the farce last night was painful, of course, and humbling. Britons like to see themselves as, the children of the mother of parliaments, and yet, the ruling party split three ways. A vote on